Oh, kia ora. And kia ora tata katoa and ngā mihi nui. Can we go to the first slide, please, and then go through? So I've actually called this kawatea. So um, kawatea, new dawn, and my argument is essentially that we're seeing huge demographic change through the 2020s, and certainly by the end of this decade and through the 2030s, a very different country will have emerged. And for me, I've just identified three elements, two demographic, one social, that I think we need to put on the table when we think about education in the broad and ECE in particular. Thank you. The first of this is fertility decline, and what are the implications for the ECE sector? We're not alone in this. If we could go to the next slide, thanks. We're certainly not alone in this, but what's happened is that our fertility is dropping and dropping fast. So if you look at this, 2.1 births per woman over their lifetime is our replacement level. And you can see we at the during the global financial crisis, if you look up from 2010, we were at a replacement level. And then as we got to about 2013, we can see that drop. The little blip is around COVID, so you can speculate around what caused that. We're down at 1.56 births per woman, which means that we're 25% below replacement levels, and that is going to have a very significant impact. I think we're going to continue down. A lot of the policy discussion is that we will stabilize around the 1.5 births, but if you look at Europe, then most countries are down at 1.2, and I think that's where we'll eventually end up. Thank you. And so what we're seeing is this very significant decrease in births. Now, the John Gerritsen story there that I've featured says 30,000 fewer school-aged children in 2032. We're going to be producing a paper next week, the we being Koi2, so Peter Gluckman and myself and Georgia Lala, and it argues for a population strategy which looks at these sorts of issues. The latest data is that between 2024 and 2034, there will be a decline of 36,000 primary school enrolments in New Zealand. And so what you can do is backfill that and say that is the numbers that will be available, if you like, as a catchment for the ECE sector will decline. So we're seeing about the primary school enrolments are a good data point for us. And we're seeing a drop of around 5,000 fewer students being enrolled in the primary sector. So that will impact upon the declining number of births will impact upon all education sectors over time. And certainly that 36,000 drop was preceded by what's been happening in the ECE sector. Thank you. OECD produced a report last year. I've highlighted the things that I think are very significant. It says employment appearance. I actually think it's the employment of females. So the tertiary qualifications of females in New Zealand and their participation in paid employment has gone up. If we look across the tertiary sector at the moment, in the professional programs like law and accountancy, 2/3 of the enrolments are now female. And so that's going to have quite a big impact. And when it comes to costs of living, and particularly the cost of housing, then you get increasingly a trade-off. Do I continue working? Do I stop working and suffer quite often financial results by having children? As you can see, they've also highlighted early child education and care policies. I spent some time recently in Sweden. I had not appreciated quite how generous they are, but a child, the birth of a child gives the parents 480 days paid leave. And when we were there, 45 of those days could be allocated to grandparents if they were looking after grandchildren. And just the generosity of those Scandinavian systems, particularly around early childhood, is quite amazing. So stick with this. So what we're seeing is a realignment, really, of our population profile. So if we go back to 1961, you can see at the bottom there the very large cohorts of the 0 to 4-year-olds, easily the largest cohort of any age group. Thank you. But if we come on to the present, then what you see is the collapse of those younger cohorts and the expansion of the older cohorts. So as we proceed out, if you take this on another decade to 2033 or 2043, the cohorts at the bottom, and in particularly for your purposes, the 0 to 4, will get smaller. So the number of children being born in New Zealand is declining. Can I give you an example? If we go back to 1970, when we were about 2.3 million people, we had 62,000 births in this country. We're currently at 5.3 million people, and our births are 58,000. And fertility decline will have quite a significant impact. Thank you. And there was a very interesting report from Treasury, which suggested that a lot of our public services and infrastructure and funding is simply not going to stand up in this very different environment. And I've got a diagram there, which is the what's called the old age dependency ratio. So it's the ratio of 15 to 64-year-olds to the over 65-year-olds. And as you'll see there in 1960, it was 7 to 1, but by 2065, I beg your pardon, it'll be 2 to 1. We're currently around 4 to 1, but that really means that the ratio between people who are in paid work and paying income tax and the people who are beneficiaries, in this case, the very large population that'll be aged over 65, we are going to struggle. States, including our own government, will come under fiscal stress. And what worries me in all of this is that a lot of the attention is going to go on the older community because the cost of superannuation, the cost of healthcare are going to keep rising. Over half of all DHB expenditure now is on the over 65s. And what we will not spend so much on is the preschool and the primary school sectors and possibly the secondary school sectors. And so we get this redistribution, but also the fiscal stress. So that's number one that I think I want to put on the table for today. Thank you. The second is that when you look at these younger populations, they are incredibly culturally diverse. The super diversity is, the notion of super diverse was coined by a colleague and friend of mine, Steve Verdevik, who's director at Max Planck in Germany. And he wanted to recognize how diverse countries and cities were getting. Thank you. And so when we think about out to the 2030s and 2040s, this country, the cultural makeup of our communities, and particularly our younger communities, is going to change very dramatically. Thank you. So the first is Māori, and this is 2043, and this is again an age profile. It's Māori and non-Māori. So the non-Māori includes Pacifica, and I want to come back to that in a moment because Pacifica have higher fertility than Māori, and particularly the Tongan community. But what you can see here is that Māori fertility is dropping, but it's not at sub-replacement levels. And so you've got a younger median population. You have Māori women having babies at a younger age. So I didn't mention before, but the average age of first birth for a mother in New Zealand is now 31. And my fun fact for you in the room is that over the last 3 years, there have been more than 1,000 births to women aged 40 and above compared to women aged 20 and below. So Māori still have children at a younger age, and they have more of them. And so when we look out into the future, you can see that the age profile of Māori in New Zealand, Aotearoa, is quite different to non-Māori. Thank you. And we've got some examples here of initiatives and programs which I reflect that, and I certainly would want to talk about the Kohangareo generation. I'm noticing pushback in terms of Māori. We've got something before the House which has come up in the last day or so. And really, for me, demography is destiny. I mean, when you get this very large cohort of Māori who are staunch in their te reo and te ao and so on, then taking Māori names off government departments or not requiring boards of trustees to take Te Tiriti o Waitangi into consideration, for me, is a very short-term political move which doesn't recognise the long-term makeup of this country. Thank you. The second, of course, is the arrival of immigrants. So we hit a peak in the 12 months to February 2024, 250,000 arrivals, a growing number of departures, which is the bottom line there, New Zealand citizens leaving, but a net gain of 131,000. In that 23-24 year, New Zealand was the fastest growing country in the OECD. We grew at 2.8%, and 85% of that growth came from net migration, that 131,000. So migration is contributing significantly to talent coming into this country, to population growth, and to growing diversity. Thank you. And where are they coming from? The blue line is pre-COVID, 2019. The orange, the yellow line, I beg your pardon, is the spike that we saw in the 2003, 2024, and then the red is coming back to 2025. So there are three big countries: India, China, the Philippines. Pre-COVID, it would have been China, India, but it's been flipped around. And the next three, Sri Lanka, Fiji, and South Africa. And then the bottom line is the departing New Zealanders. So we've got three big source countries, which is very different from our colonial history, where we got 98% of our migrants from the UK and Ireland. Now, the bulk of our migrants come from India, China, and the Philippines. Thank you. And so last year, when we began to think about this, and the we is both Stats New Zealand, but also some of us working in the area, began to think about what that would mean for the future diversity of New Zealand. If we'd been you and I had been talking 6 months ago, I would have said a quarter of New Zealanders would be from one of the Asian communities, but we've had to revise that up to 33% by 2048. Thank you. And so what I've done is I've done a little exercise, a paper exercise, which has looked at the current proportion of the population that are Māori, Asian, or Pasifika, and the brackets is the proportion of the under 15s who are Māori, Asian, and Pasifika. Asian don't have particularly high fertility, so the proportion of the population that are Asian from one of the Asian communities is about the same proportion as the under 15s, but that's not true for Māori or Pasifika. And so when we look out 10 years to 2035, you can see it going up, and then to 2045. And what's interesting here is that I think the 19.7% Māori by self-identification, by the way, not by descent, I think it's too low. And that's too low because stats are factoring in the very large number of Māori who are currently migrating to Australia. I think it's likely to be more around 20-21%, but almost a third of our under 15-year-olds will be Māori. So when we look at our overall population, 1 in 5, when we look at our young population, 1 in 3. And then the Asian population will grow out to be that almost that third, both total and under 15. And then the Pasifika will keep growing from 9 to 11. But again, look at the almost 1 in 5 of the under 15s will be from one of the Pacifica communities, because those communities have very significant fertility. They're younger, they're having children at a younger age, and they're having more children. So when we look at the ECE sector, this is the sort of diversity that you should be anticipating in the future. Thank you. And of course, we're getting pushback. We're getting, people are anxious about some of this, but we're getting some material which I think is frankly offensive. And Shane Jones' most recent comments about I'm not going to repeat all of it, but the tsunami is just, I just think is out of time and out of place. And so we're going to operate in the education sector with quite significant and divergent political views on how we should operate in this environment. Thank you. And the final one that I just want to highlight for you is work that we're looking at the moment, which is the post-COVID challenges of declining trust and challenges to our social cohesion. And I think this is, I think the early childhood sector plays a very significant role in bringing divergent cultures, languages, faiths into a New Zealand system and looking after them and being inclusive. But we're going to have challenges. Thank you. Ipsos did something a couple of years ago, which I just want to highlight, which is our crisis of confidence. Thank you. And here we've got, and this covers 40 countries. So we're comparing ourselves with 39 other countries. So in the first, New Zealand society is broken. 58% of New Zealanders said yes, it is. New Zealand is in decline. 60% said yes, it is. And we're slightly higher than what's the average. And then who is most likely to think that? Māori, low income, unemployed, live rurally, and aged 50 to 64 years. And then Māori for the second one, very clearly the group that's most likely to say New Zealand is in decline. Thank you. And what Peter Gluckman and I are looking at are the consequences for this. And we're looking at some of the data points, like the number of children that are absent from school. And you might have heard that recent example where an initiative to identify those children and to bring them into the school system had identified a child at age 7 who'd never been to school at all. And so we're seeing a lot of pressure on our communities. I mean, economic and financial pressure, obviously, but people feel less safe. And alongside that, we're seeing declining trust. Now, I've included police and media in there, but we should also say that is declining trust towards experts and our institutions that provide education. And what you see is some of the challenges that are being made. I mean, we've just been working with some secondary school principals and teachers, and the things that are being said to them in class at the moment indicates a significant, for me, shift in terms of our respect and trust in our classrooms. Thank you. And one of the things that really concerns me is what's happening online. The level of mis and disinformation, the way in which online influencers can determine and define public debate. We're getting very aggressive, angry voices. If you haven't looked at your Instagram this morning, Sam Neill talking about what he's experiencing in terms of his opposition to a certain mine in Central Otago. But people get really offensive, very aggressive, and a lot more radical views. And we're beginning to see some of this playing out in terms of the early childhood sector. And I've just got that Radio New Zealand story there. Thank you. I've done some work in this area. I think there are some broad principles that we should be looking at and trying to reaffirm. You can see them there, and you can have the PowerPoint so you can look at them. By the way, these are borrowed from Canada. I wrote I co-wrote the a 2006 cabinet paper on social cohesion. Cabinet didn't like it. I was appointed into a position in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet a few years ago in the wake of the Christchurch shooting and the Royal Commission report that said we need to invest in social cohesion. Again, government didn't like it, so it's gone. And so, and I just invite you to think about this. And this is my final one, which is thank you. Final one, which is a summary. Very different age profile, but also cultural makeup of our 0 to 5 population. And I think we need to think about this strategically. We know what our demography is going to be like in 10 or 20 years. It's not shouldn't come as a surprise. So, you can plan for this. You can think about what it means for your sector, for your institution, for your organization. I do think we need to recognize the low levels of trust we now have in our institutions, including our education sector. And I just left you with a final question. What does it mean to be New Zealand in the 21st century? We're doing some work on sport at the moment. Not sure whether you're aware, but sport, rugby has declined by 20% in the last 10 years in terms of secondary school participation. Basketball has grown. Is the big game. But here in Auckland, where I am, last year there were 60,000 registered rugby players. There are over 100,000 registered table tennis players. So there's it sounds quite a trite example, but there are some quite interesting shifts that are beginning to occur in terms of this country, and which I think those of us working in education just need to be aware of and to think, well, how should we operate? What should we be doing? Thank you. Kia ora.